All right, let's get started with our next panel. I hope everyone is feeling, so we just had an experiential session. We had a fantastic essentially welcome back and recentering, and a lunch. So we're fed, we're rested, we're centered, we have experienced all that we can. So this next panel is all about arts and well-being. As we had talked about previously in the creative aging piece, or in the creative aging panel, within a lot of the other talks previously, there are certain things that are preventable through a prolonged experience with the arts, through prolonged experiences and engagement with the arts, and I am excited to be talking about that here in this panel with three women who I have so much respect for after looking into everything about all of you. So please join me in welcoming our three panelists for this session, starting from right to left, and I feel relaxed still and already having you next to me. Stacie, Aamon, Yeldell, who is an author, speaker, music psychotherapist, and because I saw it in your bio, I don't have to get to add it, an award-winning vocalist. We have Dr. Assal Habibi, who is an associate research professor of psychology for USC Brain and Creativity Institute. And some of you might have been in the Dancing Through Parkinson's experiential session, which I saw and I thought was fantastic. That was led by our third panelist, Rachel Whiting, who is the lead teaching artist for Invertigo Dance Theater's Dancing Through Parkinson's. Welcome. Now, I don't know if the same person is around, and so if not, the same rule applies now as it did in the morning. You have questions, I have a need to get steps in. Please feel free to ask questions. So, and whoever tried to steal the mic from me last time, it's not going to work this time. The first question that's just, in general for all three of you, which is just what were the opportunities, what are the challenges that you saw within overall well-being for individuals that led to your work? And we can start here with Stacie.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the first challenge was in my own life. I started off as a singer, actually as a rapper as a kid, and was in the music business fairly early, and basically suffered a great deal of what Julia Cameron calls creative injury as a result. And so I lost my voice, lost my music, really didn't have any identity outside of being on stage. So for me, finding music therapy, finding arts and healing was really about finding myself and rediscovering that I was much more than the very myopic view that I was holding. Because in essence, it was my 8-year-old self and that 8-year-old dream, still kind of holding on, not really allowing me to evolve, So I went into healing, into music therapy in an effort to heal myself first, and then the joy of being able to bump into the ability to be in services to others and their well-being. Because for me, art is play. And when we are connecting to our playfulness, then we are connecting to our inner child, we're connecting to our spirit, and then we're connecting to presence, because what is presence but to play?
And before we go on, I'm wondering if you could explain just or define creative injury.
Oh, yes. So Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, basically said that any kind of creative abuse is child abuse. So when you are younger, such as in my case, and you experience, for me it was the record deals, losing record deals and all the wild things that happened in the music business, basically. Thankfully, nothing that I couldn't come back from, but it was all still very, very traumatizing to my artist self and to my sense of self, mainly because my sense of self had not formed yet. And that, honestly, I think that's probably what happens to a lot of what we see child stars, is when you kind of go in, you get famous really quick before you really develop that ego strength is what, is called in psychology. So for me, it was that injury that occurred to my sense of self and really impacted me developmentally, emotionally, definitely spiritually as well.
Well, I'm thankful for you finding this path and for leading to us sitting next to each other on this stage.
It's kismet.
Same question for you, Assal.
Sure. Well, thank you first for organizing this wonderful event and for having me here. It's been really inspiring all day. And I think similar to what you're describing, it comes a little bit about my own story. I was trained classical pianist growing up, knew what music did for me as a child in terms of building community, making friends, but also providing a space for emotional processing. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and when I was doing my graduate work, working in an auditory neuroscience lab, there was all sorts of auditory stimuli that I was studying, speech and language, but music seemed to be absent, so that was kind of my way of convincing the PI of that lab that I want to study how music is processed in the brain. As part of that journey, I just realized of how much music education is missing, and in terms of childhood development and in public education system. So I embarked on this journey of if we can provide evidence of the positive impact of music education on child development, from a perspective not only about their academic achievement and cognitive development, but also their social and emotional learning and how it can help them just function better in society and make friends and have more compassion and more empathy, maybe that's a way to convince policymakers that this is an investment that is worth doing and putting resources in early childhood because the results we want to see in the future would come by. So that's really how I got into this and following children with their music training and looking at the outcomes.
Right on, that's amazing. Rachel, similar question, which is you run a fantastic program with Invertigo. What led you to this point?
Also, thank you for having me. It's such a glorious space. I think we all sort of rise when we walk into this.
It's the chandeliers.
I think it is, yeah. I was like, who changes those lights? So I'm a trained professional dancer. My mom put me in ballet classes because she knew I was going to be tall, and her motivation is to have good posture and coordination. That was it. But I fell in love with it and came back and said I wanted to be a ballerina, and luckily had the support of my family. So I've been dancing my whole life until I had a physical injury, which sort of led to a creative injury, I think. So I stopped dancing. I've had 2 hip surgeries, and within that hiatus, I also lost my identity and my community. And so when I was ready to come back, I was looking for sort of a path of resiliency and recovery in an inclusive dance community. And that's a challenge when you're of a certain age and have lost a certain ability. And so I have friends that teach Dance for Parkinson's classes in San Francisco, and so I just found my local chapter and volunteered, and from that first class, I felt reconnected to what the essence of movement is. It's sitting down and just taking that first breath, and I was like, oh, I'm back. You know, in a group of people that come to dance mostly from a diagnosis, and how that contrasted of like a career goal. Sometimes I think with deep training, you can train the joy out of you. And so it's through the disability community. I also teach classes for special needs kids that I found joy. It's like that's why I stayed in dance so much. So I've been teaching Dancing Through Parkinson's for 8 years. It started in 2011. Through Invertigo Dance Theater, which is a professional dance company, and they also have a community engagement program. And it's the best hour of my week. I feel better just dancing downstairs, so yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me three. Also very thankful for, despite the earlier injuries and just general questioning, that it brought you into a different path that brings you to us. One of the things that all of this does kind of prove, which segues into the next piece, which is the holistic benefits of self-expression. And my first question is for Assal, which is, in your research and your studying, how you see self-expression through the arts having a long-term, or even in the short term, a holistic benefit on those that you're studying, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I've been following my lab, following children as part of the Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles YOLA program, which is the music education arm of the LA Philharmonic. We have been following these children since they were 6 years old. They're 16, 17 now, so we know quite a bit about them. They enrolled into the program. I remember the first time I went to the program, there was a group of 20 to 36-year-olds with violins. And all you see were like everybody just hitting each other with the bow, and there's chaos, and I'm like, well, this is never gonna work. We're never gonna be able to study, and there's no outcome. Over the years, what I observed is, so we do all the quantitative measures. They come to my lab, we do brain imaging, we have evidence of their brain development, their cognitive development, their social emotional learning, but also the expression of how they change from that chaos into individuals who were able to express themselves, who were taking turns, who had respect for one another. There was so much kind of belonging to a community. YOLA was really a place for them. It was a family. Their parents would go drop them off. They're there for 2 hours, and just really, and a sense of pride, and that they would go on a stage and perform and could talk about a child who was very shy, who would never talk ever during class. After 1 year, would take his or her violin and go on the stage and wanted to do a solo performance. So not only it taught them music skills that we expected them to learn, but also ability to stand up, to have a voice, to find their space. These are children from very underserved communities. These are not children who are given opportunities to speak, to have a turn, but they really have found their space in a way that they're proud of themselves, their parents are proud of themselves. It doesn't matter what is the level of music performance, they're really celebrated for doing music, for engaging in arts, for engaging with each other. I mean, they opened the Hollywood Bowl, so it's not that their musical level is not opening the Hollywood Bowl yet, but the community recognition of them. And I think that's really, for me, the piece that we want individuals as adults later who have that sense of confidence and leadership. And in addition to that, we have seen many benefits from a physiology and biological perspective that also kind of parallel confirmation of these developmental maturations.
And I also love and for you, it is quantifying what is otherwise qualitative results, which is, John was talking about this before, or in the last panel, and as we were preparing for it, but that is one of the things in which we try to get further and further into, which is establishing some quantitative results around the things that we say and know to be true about the arts. Is there any sort of process that you go through for that?
Well, I think, so I was thinking about that question when John was talking earlier. One is, as a researcher, today I've heard about so many great programs and witnessed them that I think I can speak from the research community that we all would love to work with art programs. We typically don't know how to. We don't know who to go to because in an academic world, you're not trained to go partner with an organization outside your university. I actually just emailed people around and see who wanted to participate. And it just happened that the director of YOLA at the time was interested, and we got together and I told them what we want to do. We're going into it without any agenda, so we are researchers. We're not going to prove that music is effective. We're going to investigate. And to their credit, the LA Philharmonic and their program just opened the door and welcomed us with, again, from their perspective, also no expectation that we are there to confirm, but we are there to show the benefits and also weaknesses and what can we do to improve that. So it takes a lot of communication. It takes demystifying the research institute. For a parent of a 6-year-old to go tell them, bring your child and I'll put them in an MRI scanner. And they look at you like you came from another planet. So it's a lot of, for us, communicating and building relationship with these communities. And the participants really became part of our organization and our institute. One of the children in the study, he was 6 when he started. He's 17 now, and he's coming back to my lab to volunteer as a research assistant. So really kind of connecting Dot that he's not only a research subject, he really contributes to this knowledge and is part of the kind of overall building of this community.
Thank you. Stacie, one of the questions I had, or it's kind of a two-parter, which is we already have seen, the immediate effects of your work, which is the mood, it lifts people, the calm is instantly there, but what kinds of long-term results do you tend to see within the individuals that you work with, in terms of providing that kind of recentering, calming kind of work?
I think the main long-term result is this belief in knowing that healing is not always going to take place through talking. Someone mentioned that before. I think the director actually of the mental health department, I've worked in psych hospitals, rehabs for 18 years before I started my own company. And one of the main things that would happen time and time again, particularly when I was working interdisciplinary, is a lot of the other therapists and the doctors, they would hear things that I would share that happened in music therapy that they didn't even know about had happened, in sessions. So what I'm seeing more often is just this more legitimacy around one of my favorite quotes by Einstein that I say all the time, which is, you can't solve a problem on the same level of consciousness in which it was created. We have to go above. We have to go beyond the mind, and I think that it's great that mindfulness is becoming more coined, and it's something that's being backed by science now, because it's just proving that not everything can be done through talking. Not everything is going to be done with a person feeling as though they're being, therapized. And that's not even accessible to everybody. So there's that part. So I think the long-term results that I'm seeing is that people are able to recognize that they can heal themselves, right? That they can tap into their own power, their own creativity. And that's really always my takeaway when I do my work with my clients is, yes, that was a very nice experience, it was relaxing, and here's what you can do when you go home. You can ground for 5 minutes. And there's so much proof around what happens when you ground, right? Anxiety and depression is at an all-time high. So doesn't it make sense that people can have their own tools and find ways to self-regulate? So that's really the big thing I've been seeing is more and more. And of course, now I'm working with the youth a lot more. And boy, let me tell you, they got it going on. A lot of them, they know what's going on.
Is that good or bad?
No. The ones that I meet, like when I've had a chance to work with Young Arts, thanks to Renee Fleming, and I did a wellness program for them, and was teaching them mindfulness, and they were teaching me. They were like, one girl said, my mom sages me every night before I go to bed. And I was like, what? So a lot of these things that are like that my generation may feel are like, okay, I need proof for this. A lot of the youth are already, understanding and knowing, these transpersonal practices, whether it be sage or grounding or whatever, that they can self-regulate. And I think that's the key. That's the long-term effect. We can self-regulate.
I love that. Thank you. Oh my goodness, Rachel, it's kind of a similar question. It's a different audience dancing through Parkinson's. We move into a certain age range, but looking at the long-term impacts and also the holistic ones. Dance, as a person who worked in dance, there are a ton of benefits to it that I've seen. What kinds of holistic benefits do you see and like to enforce for the people who benefit from your programs?
I think the biggest thing is a lot of our participants realize they're in for the long haul in terms of keep showing up, adherence, discipline, which is very much like dancers, professional dancers are trained. It's the same, because with that repetition, hopefully changes will be made. But with a movement disorder, it's small victories. We have a gentleman who, in Parkinson's, shifting weight or pivoting can be a challenge. And this gentleman, his name is Warren, was determined that he's going to get the pivot, which is just a turn. And they had a performance yesterday, and he can't stop pivoting. He's just like turning, and his wife is like, come on. And he's so happy to learn that it's beneficial. We're trying to say it's like functional movement. I think identifying how art comes into your life, perhaps later in life. I have a another woman that said she never knew she could dance until she got Parkinson's. So it's really something that it's saved people. And part of what we try to do is have creative collaboration. So we're not just dictating how one should move, but providing a platform for own individual expression. So we've created a lot of performances and screen dance films. So it gives authorship of people who move differently and celebrating difference as a creative force. We just made a film that won honorable mention at the World Parkinson Congress, which I'm going to. So that's great. It's just an award. It seems really nice. Something happened. So I think it's the small victories and also just seeing people every day and showing up and building that community. Just that welcoming force is. Sometimes that's all you need. Some people just come in and just tap their foot, but something happened. It reminds me, NPR had a blurb called "This is your brain on art." If you caught that, I gave that to all my students. And one quote I heard is that 15 minutes of dancing raises your dopamine, which we should all do. And with Parkinson's, it's a dopamine deficiency. So it's like the science kind of pulling in to support what we feel. Yeah.
Before we go to questions, my last question, which is what you see, and we'll start with Rachel, what do you see needing to happen? Part of this is we want to make sure that these programs are initiatives, goals, organizations can go in the distance, can improve, can have an even greater impact. What do you see happening in the future of arts and health?
It's been spoken a lot here today, but access. And for the disability community, the first thing is the built environments. We've showed up at spaces where there's steps up onto the stage, and so we can't perform. And so really trying to be adamant about having the ADA compliance in all performance spaces. It's still not out there, which is surprising. And then also access in terms of different platforms. We were on Zoom during the pandemic, and teaching a certain generation how to use Zoom and computers was a learning experience. But then there's the technology that's coming, like AI is a big topic, but it can also be used. There's the closed captioning. There's also technology for visually impaired. They have visually impaired ballet classes that you can take. So just creating more technology to support this community, I think, is really important. And then just giving a platform for visibility in just creatively. So it's not, you need to see more of it in the world, yeah.
Yeah. Assal, how do you think research development, R&D, as I affectionately call it, how do you think that will play a role in the increasing accessibility and effectiveness for arts and health programs?
I think partnership between research institutions and art organization, from my perspective, is the key, so we could evaluate and then give feedback of what can be done better, and quantify some of these outcomes in terms of whether we're looking at well-being, whether we're looking at development in childhood. I'd like to think, for example, that the Prop 28 that was passed in California to provide music education for all children, there was a lot of research that was cited in support of it. So there is now more funding for doing this work, thanks to Renee and NIH for providing the Sound Health Initiative. So researchers are always looking for partners in the art organization, and I think if that partnership can happen and we can learn from each other, and I think we in the research world have the capacity to then provide whatever data that means that goes to policymakers for in addition to qualitative and stories and anecdotes that are sometimes very, very powerful. I think if we can also provide the hard data, we can push this agenda even further and to more access for everyone.
Absolutely, thank you. And last question, of course, Stacie. I mean, I'm busy, you're busy, we're all busy, right? How can we, at large as an arts field, as a field, within health, how can we ensure both as we are doing this work, but also for the people we are attempting to serve, how can we encourage long-term and just sustaining mindfulness and just creating these times for us to find our center as we're continuing in this ever just constantly busy and just getting more busy world?
Yeah, I think it's about demystifying it all, and making it accessible. I think the one thing we figure out is, no one really has time. So I'm a big fan of creating micro moments, which means if I'm certain things I have to do throughout the day, I have to eat, I have to, I have to have my coffee, I have to, go to the restroom. So if I'm sitting down, even if I put the toilet seat down and I sit for a minute, that's sometimes the only peace I get in my day. That's a good moment to see roots coming out of the bottoms of my feet and grounding. So just knowing that we can create these micro moments. And I think the other thing that would be great is to, kind of take the elitism from the arts. Because honestly, I always say, performing is an option, singing is mandatory. Everybody needs to sing because everybody has a voice, and the voice is you. And if you can self-accept yourself through singing, that's a door to intimacy to the self that builds unification with the self. You heal people from that space of unification. I mean, so we have to heal ourselves first. And I think singing is a beautiful way to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you.